Welcome to Interplay. This is Michael Shapiro, your host. Today I have a most special guest from Gloucester, the UK, Adrian Partington. Hello, Adrian.
Hello, Michael.
Thank you so much for joining us on Interplay, where we talk about not only music, but also what I call what is beneath the notes, to use a phrase that Otto Klemperer used. And I know that you, Adrian Frederick Partington, is someone who is very, very concerned about spirituality and what is underneath the notes. First, I can say that you're an English conductor, a chorus master, an organist, and a pianist, and you're virtuoso in each. I have seen you work at Evensong at the Gloucester Cathedral, where you are the director of music. It's called in some churches here the minister of music, but you are called the director of music at the Gloucester Cathedral, which is ancient. We'll talk about that. You're joint conductor of the Three Choirs Festival. You're artistic director for Gloucester Festival Years, director of the BBC National Chorus of Wales, conductor of the Gloucester Choral Society, and you're the former conductor of the Bristol Choral Society and a leader of various choral conducting courses at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. Adrian, this must be a peculiar time for you. I know we've corresponded. Wasn't this the first time that the Gloucester Cathedral, where you are director of music, we'll explain what that means, was closed since the time of King John? Is that correct?
Yes, this is absolutely true. King John closed cathedrals and abbeys for a short time because the Pope at the time had excommunicated him, and this was his form of petty revenge. And so, yes, this year, the cathedral's been closed for worship for the first time since the 13th century. Absolutely true.
But Robin Hood took care of him, and when Richard the Lionhearted came back, at least so does the Errol Flynn movie state that, with the great score of Korngold, I might add.
That is a wonderful film. I love that film.
I love it. I love
the color and the music, just marvelous.
And he was a friend of my teacher, Korngold. I studied with Karl Bamberger, and they knew each other in Vienna. I heard all kinds of stories. But to get back to you and the cathedral, I've conducted, as you know, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales a year ago now for 3 days in a recording of my Archangel Concerto for Piano Orchestra with Stephen Beck and that fabulous orchestra, and several other works, including my Vidorama, which is my own orchestration of Charles-Marie Widor's Toccata from the Symphony No. 5 for organ, which you have played, I am sure, countless times.
Very, very many times, yes.
That's right.
I know my friends, the players, really enjoyed those sessions, you'll be pleased to hear.
Oh, I am very happy to hear that.
And the Vidor was a particular talking point.
Well, they were fantastic, and I hope remember the song When the Lights Go On Again, all over the world?
Well, some time away, I fear.
I fear so as well. But when I went, Marjorie and I took a tour of the Cotswolds, because I'd never seen it, where you're from, and you lived for quite a while, I understand, yes?
Well, my own little house is in the Wye Valley, actually. It's the other side of Gloucester. But it's similarly beautiful and very pastoral and not very built up. So I'm glad you've seen the Cotswolds.
Outstanding. But the thing but I said to her, we have to go see the Gloucester Cathedral because I'd read about it. And of course I knew about its place in movies. For those who are watching this now or hearing it on Apple Podcast, where this will also appear, of course the Harry Potter films, 3 or 4 of them were filmed in the Abbey sections of the Gloucester Cathedral. But the thing that struck me about the Gloucester Cathedral when we entered, first to tour it during the day and then coming back when we saw that we could come back for Evensong, was its great solemnity, its great beauty. I've been to many cathedrals throughout the world. I always go to see the architecture. I mean, Chartres Cathedral in France is the one we always talk about,
Wonderful.
And of course, Notre Dame, which we adore. But I've been to Westminster Abbey and so forth. I had not been to the Gloucester Cathedral. I really wanted to see it. And when we walked in, it is so ancient.
Mm.
And I read that it comes from the 10th century, wherein it was
Mm.
first an abbey. But
Yes.
speak to me about the music, because I understand music goes way back. You have many predecessors there, don't you?
Well, I certainly do. I mean, I think Gloucester has been a centre of United Kingdom music making for around 1,000 years. But one thing I'd like to say, we all think we're very modern, but Gloucester was originally founded in the 16th century, in the 6th century, as a monastery for men and women. Now, I think that's something to be celebrated. And one of the early leaders of the community was Abbess Keinberger. So I'm very proud to say that we had women in our community, presumably offering music as well, from over 1,000 years ago. But the monastery itself rose to prominence later, after the country had settled down, after the Norman invasion of 1066, which most people will know about, into a Benedictine monastery. But the first time we know that there was singing was in the late 15th century. But of course there was singing before that, because there are references to boy choristers being employed. I think the monks may have got a little bit lazy and then brought in musicians to do their singing for them. But Henry VIII, as I'm sure you know, King Henry VIII, he abolished the monasteries in the 1530s and 1540s, but immediately established a system of English services, matins in the morning, evensong in the evening, and all the worship to be conducted in English and sung by a choir, which was of men and boys, now happily of girls, boys, men, and women. So we are the successors to a tradition which goes back in its present form to the 1540s, and it's something really to be proud of.
It's extraordinary, because we have very little to compare here in the States because we're so young.
Mm-hmm.
But the tie between, our countries is so tight at this point, especially after the First and Second World Wars.
Yes.
And it'll get tighter again, I promise you.
Well, I think it's tight now because of our shared problems. I mean,
yes, sir.
In many ways, I think Europe is a cultural extension of the United States, rather than the other way around. When your country was growing as a nation, it imported ideas from Europe, but I think the traffic is more in the opposite direction now.
Well, I seek inspiration, I will tell you, in the British Isles. I really do.
We have a national characteristic for all our races here, which is, on the whole, quite tolerant. The extremes of behavior that we see in other parts of the world tends not to happen here. People get angry, of course they get angry. People get passionate, but we're still reasonably calm as a nation. Although we haven't handled coronavirus terribly well, I can tell you that.
No, I can imagine. We'll have a conversation offline about personal effects of coronavirus, which I can tell you all about, but not today.
I'm sure.
But I do want to speak to you about the composition of the choir. When
Yes.
I came to a service that was in memory of Sri Lankan people who had been
yes.
killed. And your conducting was really quite magical. And it was of music of the Elizabethan period mostly.
Sure.
In terrific acoustics.
Yeah.
In the choir section before the main altar, I think it is, in the back there. It is just incredible. Are there multiple spaces for you to perform in the cathedral?
Yes, we're blessed with singing galleries. In fact, we have two, they're called tribune galleries, and service can be held up there, or we can use them for sort of Venetian corrispezzati music. We have a large organ loft, which you probably noticed. We have choir groups up there sometimes. If you're doing Monteverdi, you can divide the choir into 3 or 4 parts. And we have a large chapel, a very late medieval chapel called the Lady Chapel. And in that, I don't know if you went to it, there were 3 singing galleries, 3 galleries built specifically to hold singers. And as you say, the acoustics of the building are uniquely beautiful. And I'm told our master mason here tells me that it's because of the quality of the stone, which comes from the Cotswolds, as a matter of fact. It's very, very hard limestone. And he also says because the arches are round rather than pointed, they are better acoustically. So, in short, the sound is fantastic. Just
and
fantastic.
The reverberation was fabulous. It was not. Do you do much recording there?
We do a bit, yes. We've just recorded something which has gone into 12th place in the classical music charts. I'm proud to be able to tell
Bravo.
you. So, a requiem by a modern British composer called Ian Venables.
Yes.
But it was written for the building, and so he knew just how to pace it, you know. So it's slow moving harmonic music, but very, very beautiful, and has proved fantastically popular.
Talk to me about do you have a school there for
Yes,
young
we do.
singers? And
We
of
do.
course, this is in hiatus now. But tell me about.
No, it's not. Well,
it's
it
not?
is. Yes. Well,
Okay.
it kind of is. Kind of is.
All right. Describe
school is-
in the best functioning time without disease. What do you do there specifically?
Well, the boys and girls go to school at this. It's called the King's School because Henry VIII wasn't a very modest chap, and he named the school after himself when he founded it. And what happens is that just the boys at the moment, the girls rehearse later, but because of staffing, that kind of thing, I see the boys every morning at 8 o'clock, and they do an hour's rehearsal before going to school. And the girls rehearse after school for historical reasons, but that's going to change next year. So they are very, very closely linked and always have been. And it's a luxury. It's a total luxury to have all the children coming from one school.
You know, I also think about one thing. I'm a great student of Bach, obviously, as a composer. And I think of the situation when he was writing music. In that small area, surrounded by the boys who lived there, plus all his children, plus in succession 2 wives, and he's sitting in another room writing this stuff down for the next Sunday, these cantatas and then the larger pieces, and dealing with the screaming and the hollering and the kids running and playing and all that. To me, it's a fascinating image.
It is, and it's one that I think of often.
But you have real experience of it, Adrian.
Well, I do, because I have lots of children myself, as indeed do you. Not as many as Bach, but I'm used to trying to be creative with pandemonium going on round about me. But the children know that they are doing something special. You know, they come into the building and they're still wide-eyed and enthusiastic as they were when they first came. It's rather lovely. I just wish more people could have the opportunity. I mean, we do have lots of other choirs here, so that everybody who wants to can sing. Anybody in the city can sing. But the cathedral choir obviously has to be formed through competitive audition. Because not every child has got the musicianship to be able to sing Bach or Bird, you know?
No, I know quite well. My father was a boy tenor in a choir, and my brother had a beautiful tenor voice. I did not have as good a voice.
But, you had a very sonorous bass voice, though.
Well, now I do. Now I do. Yes, thank you. I'll come and sing next time. I cannot wait to come back. But, you know, I'm curious about also as a conductor, because you're an outstanding professional conductor. You do not conduct the music conducts you, which from another conductor, I can say this. I could see the way you use your hands, the way you use your body, the way you use your eyes, the air in you, the way you breathe with them.
It's so important.
Yes, but it's quite fine, and it's very, you have daily, weekly, yearly experience to the extent that many other conductors do not get, even those that work in the opera house and ballet. You're working all the time on all different levels. But I have a question for you about the upbringing of a great choral conductor like you. And I should say, not choral conductor, conductor, maestro. You started out as a keyboardist from musical parents. Is this not right?
Although I must say straight away, the greatest formative influence on my life was being a choir boy, singing as a child in a choir. I think that's the most important thing you can offer a child. It's simple, it's free, it's totally rewarding, and it gives you the best life experience. Singing in the choir is just the best thing you can do.
And that was in Worcester Cathedral?
In Worcester, yes. It's about 30 miles from here. It's not as nice as Gloucester.
I've been in Worcester, but I've been in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Yes, I've been there.
Where we've recorded music with the Boston Symphony without a different Worcester, but they pronounce it Worcester in Massachusetts. Yeah. The Three Choirs Festival, of which you are co-director, is with, refresh my recollection, Hereford, Worcester, and Gloucester.
Yes, indeed. Well done, yes.
Yes, and for me, being a student of the Thomas Tallis fantasy of Vaughan Williams, which was premiered in your cathedral.
Sure was. I've done it 2 or 3 times. And there's another piece. He just knew the acoustic, because Vaughan Williams, I'm proud to say, was born in Gloucestershire.
Oh, wow.
As indeed was Holst. Do you play much Holst planets? Presumably you've conducted.
No, of course we do. And Elliot Carter, who I was very close friends with, studied with Holst.
Did he really?
Yeah,
what a late history. God.
It's a strange history when you think of Elliot's music and the music of Holst, but he did study with Holst and he liked it. He also predominantly studied with Nadia Boulanger, which is my background.
Of course.
Through Ellie Siegmeister, who was the intermediary between myself and Mademoiselle. So,
a name I know. Yes, wonderful.
Yes. So in yes. Wonderful. Well, it's this very, very good training, which I went through, the species counterpoint and the really fugue, etc. It has carried me all these years.
Sure.
But in any event, I'm very curious to know about the progress of a person, although you were a choir boy in a great cathedral in Worcester, and you come from musical parents, I know that. You then studied, I know, with Howells. You studied organ.
Yes.
You studied conducting. You studied piano. You're a very fine pianist. You play piano concerti. And but you have many recordings, especially when you were working with the CBSO, which I have also conducted at one point fairly recently. Wow. On the recording of my second symphony was done with the CBSO right after Andrus left, before Mirga.
Fantastic.
But I've been in Bram, but you were there for a good period of time as when Simon was there, I understand.
I was, yes, but I formed a youth choir, because it's always, as I've already demonstrated, my vision is the whole world to sing. Sounds dreadfully corny, but we set up choirs for the orchestra,
Yes.
And the older children were thrilled to take part in, Mahler's 8th Symphony and Mahler's 3rd Symphony and King Roger by Szymanowski and all these things.
Oh, wonderful.
Where there's children's choirs, just marvelous years. And it was fantastic for me to live in the shadow of Simon Rattle for 3 or 4 years before he moved to Berlin. What a tremendous man he is.
He really is. And you've actually worked in Berlin as well, haven't you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've played the organ in Berlin. I've accompanied the Berlin Radio Choir a couple of times. And last year, I was thrilled to take the Gloucester Cathedral choristers to sing at the Philharmonie in a youth concert, actually. A concert with members of the orchestra, not the whole orchestra. And we sang cantatas, 2 cantatas, one by Nico Muhly, I'm sure you've come across, and one by Jonathan Dove.
Lovely.
So,
lovely,
great experience. And my daughter lived there, so that was nice.
I've only been there once. I was at a conference there, and I did see Schulte conduct Missa Solemnis.
Did you?
So, oh yes.
Wonderful.
At the end of his life. So, getting back to the progress, I mean, I know several people. I'm active in Chorus America here, and I have friends like Deborah Simkin King, who is an organist and a wonderful choral director in in what we call an Episcopal background here, which is, of course, tied to the Anglican Church.
Yes, I understand.
And I've spoken to her about the progress from being an organist to being a conductor in a cathedral and the skills necessary for both. Not only dealing with the people who sing, but dealing with the pastors, dealing with the administration, dealing with the board of trustees, and so forth. So there's a bit of political activity.
Certainly.
But I'm curious about if you could talk about, and this is a very kind of intimate question, but it's a question of upbringing, which I think about all the time at my age, thinking about where am I going and where have I come from, from my educational background and experience background. What did studying keyboard and being such a virtuoso organist do for you, or has done for you, in becoming the great conductor that you are? I'm curious. Have you thought about that?
Yes, I have. I think that for me, the conductors I feel most comfortable with are those who are also performers, in the same way that I think that the composers that interest me are also performers. I think some career conductors don't always know about the executive difficulties that their performers are having if they haven't done it themselves. And do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And my job here, although I'm called director of music, historically, heads of music at cathedrals were called this curious English title, organist and master of the choristers. So for the last 500 years, those two sets of skills have been seen as being together, you know. And so I just grew up doing both. And it may mean that I'm not as good an organist as somebody who just plays the organ, and I'm not as good a singer as somebody who just sings. But the church has historically required both those skills to be developed together. And so therefore, not only do I have to conduct, I have to play. So I'm always aware, at least I hope I'm always aware, of what my performers are facing, because half the time I have to play myself. I will tell you something.
Yes, please.
My most recent professional engagement, one for which I was humbly grateful because there hasn't been a lot of professional work around in the last few months. I spent the last 3 days playing the harmonium in reduced scoring masterpieces. You know, after the First World War, Schoenberg and Irving Stein and people like that rescored big pieces for chamber ensemble. Otherwise, they weren't going to get performed.
Das Lied von der Erde. Das Lied von der Erde.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yes.
Absolutely. We did Schubert's stuff. We did Mahler's Fourth Symphony. And the conductor was an American, splendid man called Ken Woods.
I know Ken. He's a friend.
Yeah, well, I've been playing, you see, and this is my thesis, that I feel comfortable with conductors who themselves perform, you know, and that's what I try and do, because I think they have another dimension to helping performers give of their best. That's my view anyway.
No, it's an excellent view, and it's a view that I share. The composers that I have the closest relationship to have been performers.
Sure.
You know, I'm a student of Sir Malcolm Arnold. I don't know if you knew that. Who was he was an interesting character. You know, he played trumpet in the London Philharmonic.
Yeah, his music needs to be better known. He was tremendous.
He was quite the character. But, and, you know, Ben Britton was a fabulous conductor and an amazing pianist who could keep up with Sviatoslav Richter. I mean, you know,
yes, absolutely.
Astounding stuff. I'm not that kind of pianist. I'm an accompanist and have been for years. But to keep up with Sviatoslav Richter and beat him, I've seen some videos. It's just amazing.
that Mozart duet in D. Have you seen that film?
Yes, I have.
Britain, Richter is focused and doing it for Britain, was playing all the right notes, but was also aware and alert and smiling and, just enjoying it because the music was so in him.
Yes, it was. Extraordinary. Yes. I've spent time in Aldeburgh, by the way, and on the beach there and the Maltings and so forth. Oh, it's just incredible. And I went to the grave. I actually knew Peter Pears. He came to Juilliard when I was there and spent the day with him, and he was magnificent. While Britain was still alive, just a few months later was not a good ending, but at a very ridiculously young age. But I want to talk to you about Under the Notes, a concept that I really love. And it's tied to spirituality, which I know you're full of, which I love. I could see it when you conducted even so. And that magnificent music. When you approach a new piece, or maybe even a piece you sang when you were a choir boy at the Gloucester Cathedral, I know that you think about this because I can see it. Some performers, conductors, pianists, cellists, violinists, are what I call athletes. And they are not people who focus on realizing what is going on in the piece. Now, I reflexively go there because I'm a composer. And, I think of Beethoven, I think of the form, and I think of the impulse and the integrity and everything else. And when I think of Wagner, I cannot conduct very good Wagner. I cannot. Because there's just something about him that I find so repulsive as a human being. Although I know the music cold, I've coached it. And I love parts of Parsifal, and I hate parts of Parsifal. So where I'm going is, if the music is something that I relate to, and that's most composers, I can seek a door into the psyche of the person and perhaps get under the notes. So when you're looking at the music of Byrd during the Renaissance, or the music of Howells, or the music of Elgar, or any of these wonderful composers you do in the cathedral, or with the BBC, or with the singers of the various semi-professional, professional groups you conduct all the time, what are you approaching when you get that piece in front of you? You're in that studio. They're not around. What are you doing? How do you prepare?
Well, it goes without saying that if I'm doing a new piece, or a piece I even know, I read as much around the subject as I possibly can. And since most of my work these days is to do with choral music, the most important thing is that you have a perception of the meaning of the text. And I try and think, what does the composer mean by this? What does this line, why did he set this line in that way? I think about this all the time. But I'm also aware of something, and I don't want to come across as being some sort of slightly mad Christian zealot. Although I am a believer,
yes.
I believe that the world does not exist for itself. Let me put it like that. That there is a purpose in our being here. I think a lot of composers had an instinct that meant that their work was not for themselves, that they were a kind of channel of energy for something greater than themselves. And unquestionably Bach felt that, unquestionably Byrd felt that, and perhaps later composers have struggled with that notion. But the reason that I find working in the cathedral so fulfilling is that I think whether you believe in Christianity or not, it is surely a healthy thing that you see yourself as an artist as serving some greater purpose than your own ego.
That's right.
And that is how I approach the music. I'm not one for flinging myself around and demonstrating my emotions in public. What I try and do, and this sounds, I don't want this to sound pompous and old-fashioned, is just help the performers serve the music to the best of their ability and my own ability. And if you take the approach that music is a symbol of something greater than yourself, you can apply it to any sort of music making. You know, some famous atheist composers, it works with them too, because real genius, like, I don't know, Stravinsky, Shostakovich, who are not, you know, obviously Christians or spiritualists of any kind, they definitely had a perception that they were doing something which was bigger than themselves.
There's no question about both of them, and no question about so many others. When you first became the director of music at the Gloucester Cathedral, I read an article in the local newspaper, which is online, and you wrote about, I did my research, you wrote about when the cathedral first went up in those years, there was a daily spirituality in people tied to the observance and perhaps even the hearing of music. And that somehow in our modern world, the daily spirituality, I'm talking about all religions and creeds,
Yeah.
None of us have a right to say that ours is better than the other, because only God knows. Only God knows the answer, and there is no answer, I would hope.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I felt going into the Gloucester Cathedral and Evensong, not being Anglican, that I was completely welcome.
I hope so.
I felt that. And we have a tradition here in the National Cathedral, which is a related church to yours, I believe, which is, I think, Episcopalian, where it's very open, especially now with all the turmoil. So that, to me, is the most magnificent thing I can find in the spirituality of religion, of which I'm quite a religious person, coming out of my own tradition. But be that as it may, I conduct the Verdi Requiem and the Brahms Requiem and the Elizabethan composers when I can get to it. And it doesn't, I don't have any differentiation in my soul, because there is no absolute right to say one of us is right or wrong. We're not.
Correct. No.
When composers set words to music, and you're right in the middle of it, do you see opportunities gained or opportunities lost?
What an interesting question. I think the glib answer is that the greatest composers grasp opportunities, the less good composers miss them. And I have complete control, I'm happy to say, on the music that I program here. So I tend not to program stuff that I don't think is very good. That's avoiding your question, really. But there was a survey done by a PhD student of our music lists, spread over 10 years. And I'm very pleased to say that by far, the most represented composer here was William Byrd, whose music I have a particular affinity to. And I think he gets such richness out of text and just never misses an opportunity.
This is quite true. And, I'm a composer of 100 songs and many choral works, as you know.
Wow.
And no, the whole idea of prosody, the setting of words to music, and just making sure that something happens is a great art, and it's a delicate art that I've worried about my entire life. So I will say that this has been a great joy, Adrian Partington. I look forward to going to that local pub and...
Yes, you must.
I will come back and toasting you and the glories of the Gloucester Cathedral and the BBC National Chorus of Wales and everything that you do. I know this is a very difficult time for you as a living musician who works all the time with people from all kinds of backgrounds.
I do.
Which is a very important, crucial, organic activity. It is not abstract in any way, shape, or form. And I deeply respect your work. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian Partington, for being part of Interplay, Conversations in Music.
Great pleasure.
This is your host, Michael Shapiro.